Hello. Right, welcome to the live stream. Happy Monday. It's great to see you, and we're going to go and do a weekly update. Hello, and welcome to another weekly update. That's what the intros look like when you press the wrong button and you expected to see the intro, and instead you just saw your face. Hi, it's great to see you. Trying to do on the live stream again this week. Keeps it interesting, keeps it fun, and hopefully keeps it kind of more interactive as well. I'm full of hope that all of the live stream chat stuff works. I'll be honest, it's quite quiet this month. It's quite quiet this week for really interesting new things. There are some things to talk about. We've got 4 different things to talk about. And it's nice in a way because it gives us a little chance to just expand our horizons a little bit away from, I traditionally talk about Microsoft Teams development. More and more actually over the past year or so, I'd say, that has expanded out from just Teams to be Microsoft 365 development. And so it's nice to look around a little bit, and we've had a chance over this kind of quiet period of the summer to expand our horizons a little bit. But I am going to start with Teams, and because there's still stuff happening. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is some changes to the Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio. And this is big Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. There's also these changes in Visual Studio Code as well, but let's just talk about Visual Studio for now. And the Microsoft Teams Toolkit, it has evolved over the past couple of years as being a really nice way for developers to scaffold up new applications if they don't know or don't want to know and don't want to kind of take the time to understand all of the intricacies involved in building a Microsoft Teams application, of which there are various different types of application, each of which have their own intricacies, that manifest files, like ways to set them up and stuff like that. So if you just want to get going, the toolkit is a really nice way of doing that. The thing that the toolkit for me has always been like a thing has been, it can be quite like a black box. And yes, it definitely sets something up. So if you say, I want to build a new messaging extension using the Teams Toolkit, it will create an empty project file. It will create a kind of sample, very small sample messaging extension for you, and all the manifest and all the setup behind the scenes and all the tunneling. So you can just press F5 and it will work in Teams. That's useful, really, really useful for getting started. But the thing is, it can kind of mean that you don't really know what it's doing under the hood. And so you don't know how to change it if you need to change it. So there's been some changes to that. And so I think that's really, really good. And I want to talk about them now. So let's dig into it a little bit. This is the blog post from the Microsoft 365 blog, developer blog. And what you can see is they've actually replaced the whole build lifecycle of a Teams application that's built into the Teams Toolkit. They've replaced it with this YAML file, and I don't know, I kind of like a love-hate relationship with YAML files. I like the idea of them. I struggle with the implementation of them, but maybe that's just me, and I just need to get over myself and just practice more and get happier with them. And maybe I don't use them enough, and that's why I don't like them very much. But anyway, it is what it is. It's a YAML file. And to be honest, like, a YAML file is probably the best description. Like, it's the best descriptive way of what this is doing. Anyway, they've taken all of the deployment steps that happen when you press F5 in the Teams Toolkit, and they put them into this YAML file, so they're much easier to see what's happening, and crucially means that you can start to lift the covers a little bit and change what's happening if you need to. That's really cool as well. So, I mean, you can see here, like here's a provisioning example. Like this is what happens when you do provision. These are the things it does. These are the things it creates. And you can just jump in here if you want to and change some of these things. You can comment things out. You can add new things in. And that's the same for all of these things. Deploying to Azure, adding the manifest. Really, really nice. All the kind of tunneling stuff. You can basically lift the covers now on this stuff and get the ability to change it and control it. And I think that's really good. I think having the Teams Toolkit and have it be able to automate all of the features has been amazing. It's been a real enabler for lots and lots of people to get started. I think this is the next stage of that, which is making it easy then to customize and change for when you've done all that and now you want to kind of explore a little bit more and do a little bit more. So I think that's really, really cool. So I'm pleased to see this. This is in both Visual Studio Code and also in Big Visual Studio. So that's good to see. And honestly, like people ask me this quite a lot. Like I use both. I use both Big Visual Studio and I use Visual Studio Code, and it kind of depends on the project at the time on what gets used where. And that's some of that's personal choice, but also I feel like Visual Studio Code maybe lends itself more to front end development. Maybe it lends itself more to like that style of things, whereas Big Visual Studio for me lends itself more to kind of middleware, backend APIs, Azure functions, that sort of stuff. Azure functions are an interesting crossover. You could do a good job in either, but yeah, more and more though, the crossover is getting wider, and I don't know, they're just different things, and they've come from different places. They've got different histories. And because of that, they are different applications, and I think there's a place for both of them. So I'm glad to see that Microsoft think there's a place for both of them as well. Okay, let's go somewhere completely different. And if you're like me, yes, you do development on Microsoft Teams, but you quite often get dragged into doing other things and go other places, especially around and about the Microsoft stack. And it hey Oz. How's it going? It's good to see you. And yes, it's nice I quite like doing live streams because you know that people are here. Real people exist on the other side of the ether, especially post-COVID. It's good to know that people are still out there. Azure, let's talk Azure PowerShell functions. So this is an interesting place. So like I say, this isn't maybe a natural place for you, but you might get asked, you might get drawn into this stuff, and sometimes it's the right tool to solve the job, right? So you've got PowerShell, you've got Azure Functions, you can run PowerShell in Azure Functions, and maybe you're doing all of that and you want to connect to storage accounts or you want to do SFTP. Anyway, there's a blog post for you. I thought this was really interesting. This is on the Apps on Azure blog, which I don't follow super closely actually, but it's kind of interesting. Again, it's not just Microsoft 365, it's all Microsoft, it's all Azure. It's come out of the Azure division, so it's kind of covering all development styles and developing on all different things. But this is a really good blog post actually. It's written up by someone who had to solve this problem. Those are always good blog posts actually, where it's come from somebody who is trying to solve a real world problem for a customer, and then they've not only have they solved the problem, they've learned something along the way, and then the best bit, they write it down and they write it up for the rest of us, and probably as well, if I'm honest, they write it down so that they don't forget it for next time. So this is what they want to do. They wanted to use Azure PowerShell functions to work with storage accounts and an SFTP server. So this is really cool. They've got a bunch of sample code in GitHub that they've done, and then they start with that to be like, if this is you and you need to solve this problem, here's the code, you can get going. And then after that, they then step back and dig into, okay, what's the detail? How exactly is this solving the problem? Talk to me about authentication. Where are the secrets stored? What's the identity going to be? And how's it going to work? And then they just go through the code. It's a nicely written blog post, and I think it's cool. They do some other things with the Azure Storage SDK, you can kind of see how this is done. as well. It's nice. It's one of those blog posts that, if you're trying to solve this problem, this is like the perfect blog post for you, because somebody has trodden that path already and they've been good enough to write it down and tell you where all the holes are and where all the bear pits are. So that's really, really good. It's one to kind of just remember that it exists, because you might not be doing this right now today, but you might be doing something similar. You might be, I'm right in that place actually, where, in the next couple of weeks, I'm probably going to have to do something with PowerShell on Azure. So that's not something I do every day. Like, I've done it before, but I wouldn't say I'm expert at it. I know PowerShell, I know Azure. I'm almost certain there's going to be some nuances to using those two things together that I've forgotten about. So it's good to have a blog post like this to, just to remind me. So that's all good. Let's stay on Azure for a minute. And this is kind of interesting, because you don't really stop to think about this. You think about Azure as the big platform, the big cloud in the sky, and all the workloads are in Azure now, and it's become a massive part of Microsoft life and our life. But it's interesting to think about the SDKs. So we know there's SDKs for various bits of Azure, and you've probably used these if you do anything. If you interact with storage accounts. That's the thing people do quite often in code, right? You want to write something to a storage account or read it back. So there's an SDK for that, right? There's the storage SDK. Or you might want to go and do something else, and there's an SDK for that. It turns out there's actually a ton of different SDKs all across the Azure stack. And they get updated kind of on a cadence, and every month there's a whole bunch of updates to different SDKs. And I found a blog post that kind of, I don't know if they do it every month, but they've done it for August, and they've kind of like listed out all of the things that have changed and been updated in August around Azure SDKs, which I found fascinating. So you can go through this list. You can kind of, there's some in here that we know about and that we've seen. So I spotted, I'm not going to be able to find it now, but here it is, the Azure Communication Job Router. Okay, so we spoke about that last week, I think, or the week before, as being something that is, new. And that's kind of interesting to us, because that's the world we operate in, around Teams and around Azure Communication Services. But there's other things in here that we're not so familiar with, but it's good to know that they exist, because you never know when you might need some of these things. So Azure SDK for Go, for like Java management libraries. There's an Azure SDK for Python management libraries. Lots of management library. These are all beta releases, but lots of management library releases this month. Event hubs for C++. That's interesting. And then there's some other stuff as well. You've got cognitive search, communication chat, some Azure communication phone number stuff. We talked through that as well a couple of weeks ago. There's a whole bunch of different things, and it's kind of useful to just to know this stuff exists. Whatever it is you're trying to do in Azure, there's very possibly an SDK to help you, and so that's worth remembering. It's worth looking around a little bit just to make sure, just to kind of make sure that you're not making things more complicated than you need to. Microsoft will try and make things easy for you where they can, and they do that often by offering SDKs to help you. And so it's worth checking out which ones exist. The other interesting thing I took away from that is the language support across, really across the breadth of Microsoft Azure for different languages, and doing things in different ways with different languages, whether it's Go, whether it's Java, whether it's Python, C++, or whatever. It's not just the kind of first-party Microsoft languages that get all the really good support. So that's good to see. I think it's important. And it's very new Microsoft as well. All right. So one more thing to tell you about, and it's not specifically a developer-y thing, but it is a Teamsy thing. And it's kind of just interesting because when Teams Premium came out earlier in the year, one of the key features of Microsoft Teams Premium was its watermarking functionality. So this is something that you can enable in a Teams meeting, and we'll put a watermark on the feed, meaning that if you're taking screenshots or capturing video from it, you're going to have this nasty watermark over it. Means that you can't share it. And the interesting thing about the watermark is that it's user specific. So if stuff does get leaked, you know immediately who's leaked it. And the way they do that is they take your email address and they use that as the watermark, and they overlay that onto your, onto your feed, if you like. Kind of at runtime, I think. The reason that's interesting is that it meant a whole bunch of stuff couldn't then happen, and one of those was recording, because how would the recording happen if it's also trying to overlay a watermark that is very specific to the user? The whole point of recording, if you think about the architecture of recording a Teams meeting, is it gets recorded once in one place and then everybody has access to it. And you record it once and then access it many times, for as many times as many people want the recording or whatever. That doesn't work where you've got watermarking that is supposed to be user specific, unless you can apply the watermarking kind of to the recording, maybe kind of in real time, I guess, as it gets played back. Anyway, for all of those reasons, recording was not something that was available with watermarking. So you had to choose between recording the meeting or using watermarking. And if you think about the sort of meetings that do need watermarking, a lot of the time, they're probably also the meetings that need recording. So there's this kind of like horrible dichotomy of like, we want both of these things and we can only have one. Anyway, that's being solved. You are soon going to be able to do watermarking and recording together. We've got a Microsoft roadmap item for this, and it's really interesting the way it's worded. So what they say is watermark support is available for one player when meeting is recorded with watermark enabled in Teams meetings. Users should be able to record the meeting when watermark is enabled. Now, I don't know what one player is. I imagine it's kind of I'm going to guess, it's either the kind of player experience you get in Microsoft Stream, or it's the built-in, like one player makes it sound like a universal player, right? So maybe it's Microsoft's internal wording, an internal term for the kind of unified playback player. And maybe it's in Stream, maybe it's also in Teams, it's in SharePoint, it's wherever that recording is and lives. It kind of gets processed through this one player, both on the web and on mobile platforms, it says. And the watermarking support is going to be available for the one player. So I guess what that means is when you come to play something, when you come to play your recorded meeting, or presumably download it, the one player is going to overlay the watermark at that point. So everybody gets their own watermarking on the recording. So this is going to be really useful because it means that you're going to be able to have watermarking and recording together, which is excellent. This is currently in development. It's a kind of a new thing. It just got added last week, and the rollout start for it is set to October 2023. So that's not that far away. And so it's good to see. It's one that is definitely worth keeping an eye on as it goes from development to rolling out to launched, because it is going to be super useful for lots of people. It's good to see as well. It looks like it's going straight to all of the clouds, so not just worldwide, but also GCC, GCC High, and DoD. I don't know why that is. Often things take a long time to get out to GCC and DoD, just because they tend to move a little bit slower. This might be one of those things that is like that, and actually we won't see the detail of where it gets launched and rolled out until it happens. Or it might be that this is being rapid rolled to all of those places because maybe those higher security clouds actually need this more, and that might be the reason. All right, I think that's everything I want to talk about this week. It's been fun doing the live stream. Thank you for watching. The recording will still be there. The way this works is I'm also recording this locally as well as doing the live stream. YouTube's a bit funny about live streams and recordings. It takes ages for the live stream to process and render, and until it does, I don't get a link to embed. That's a real kind of a pain for me, because what I've tended to do is do the recording, and then as soon as the recording's done, get the blog post up and out, get the all the links and stuff out as soon as I can. I can't really do that with the live stream. I've got to wait like maybe 12 hours for the processing to happen. It takes a really long time for live streams for some reason. I don't know why that is. But until I can get a shareable link. So the blog post will come out later, but I don't know, it's quite nice in a way to do the live stream now and then maybe push the blog post till the end of the day, because then we'll catch kind of America waking up and stuff like that. And also it means that you guys get the jump early. You get a good 12 hours on everyone else for all the interesting stuff. But also the bigger value of the live stream as well is that you can kind of feedback. I'm trying to do a much better job of watching the comments and kind of what's happening. We'll see how well I do at that. But you know, it's hard, but I don't know, it's good fun though, and that's in some ways the most important part. All right, I'm going to stop wittering on and let you get back to your day. Whatever it is you're doing today, I hope you have a great one. If you hear any interesting stuff around Microsoft Teams, not just specifically Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365 development stuff, Azure stuff, Azure Cognitive Services, if you hear something interesting, if you see a good blog post, let me know. It'd be great to be able to kind of highlight it next week and say thank you. So let me know if you see anything. In the meantime, have a great one, and I will speak to you again next week.